My sister moved her housewarming party to the same day as my husband's funeral. She called his burial a minor event that would ruin her vibe. My parents defended her, claiming the living deserved priority over the dead. They had no idea that the mansion they were celebrating and the luxury cars in the driveway and the very clothes on their backs were all paid for by the man they were refusing to honor. By the time the last bottle of champagne was popped, they were not just embarrassed, they were homeless. Before I tell you how I evicted my entire toxic family in front of Atlanta's elite, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the family bank account that finally closed its doors. My name is Dominique, and at 34 years old, I was standing in the viewing room of Henderson Funeral Home, surrounded by the smell of lilies and chemical preservatives. The air conditioning was humming, but sweat was trickling down my back. I was staring at a catalog of caskets, trying to choose between the mahogany with gold handles or the oak with the velvet lining. My husband Julian deserved the mahogany. He deserved a monument. He had been the silent king of my world, a man who drove a 10-year-old Toyota and wore plain t-shirts, but whose mind for business had quietly built an empire nobody knew about. To my family, he was just Julian, the quiet guy who probably worked in data entry. To me, he was everything. And now, he was gone. My phone vibrated in my hand, shattering the silence. The screen flashed the name Chantel, my younger sister. I took a deep breath, expecting condolences. Maybe she was calling to ask if I needed help with the obituary. Maybe she was finally going to ask how I was doing. I slid the answer button across the screen. Hello, Chantel. My voice was raspy from 3 days of crying. Dom, finally. I have been calling you for an hour. Look, we have a huge problem. Her voice was not sad. It was frantic, high-pitched, the tone she used when she broke a nail or when her Instagram engagement was down. What is it? I asked, rubbing my temples. It is the date, Dom, Saturday. You booked the funeral for Saturday. That does not work for me. You have to move it. I froze. The funeral director, Mr. Henderson, looked away politely, pretending to study a floral arrangement. Excuse me, I whispered. Saturday is the housewarming party, Dom. Remember, Hunter and I have been planning this for months. His boss, the VP of sales, is coming. We have caterers booked. We have a DJ. I cannot have you throwing a pity party at a graveyard on the same day. It is going to kill the vibe. I felt the blood drain from my face. My husband had died of a sudden aneurysm 72 hours ago, and my sister was worried about her vibe. Chantel, this is not a birthday party I can reschedule. It is a funeral. People are flying in. The church is booked. So unbook it, she snapped. Do it Sunday. Or Friday. Honestly, doesn't matter. Julian is dead, Dom. He is not going to know the difference. But this party is crucial for Hunter's career. This is our introduction to high society. Do you want to sabotage your brother-in-law's future? I gripped the phone so hard, I thought the glass would shatter. The audacity was breathtaking. Chantel, the golden child. The former beauty pageant runner-up who had never worked a real job in her life. She lived in a sprawling estate in Buckhead that she claimed Hunter bought with his tech startup money. I knew better. But right now, grief was heavier than anger. I am not moving the funeral, Chantel. If you cannot come, then do not come. Fine, she hissed. Be selfish, but do not expect Mom and Dad to be there. They are helping me set up. This is a major event, Dom. Yours is just a formality. She hung up. The silence that followed was deafening. A minor event. A formality. I stared at the phone, my hand shaking. Mrs. Brooks, Mr. Henderson said softly, have you decided on the casket? I looked at the mahogany one again. It was $8,000. It was expensive, but Julian had life insurance. I had my savings. We were fine. Or so I thought. Yes, I said, my voice trembling. The mahogany. He would have liked the finish. Excellent choice. I just need a credit card for the deposit and the service fees. The total comes to $12,000. I pulled out the joint checking account card I shared with my mother. It was an old account from before I was married, one I kept active to help her with groceries and bills. I had transferred $20,000 of my own savings into it yesterday, specifically to cover these costs, so I would not have to touch Julian's investments while they were in probate. I handed him the card. He swiped it. A moment later, the machine beeped. A harsh, rejecting sound. He frowned and tried again. Beep. Mrs. Brooks, it says declined. Insufficient funds. That is impossible, I said, panic rising in my chest. I transferred 20 grand into that account yesterday morning. Run it again. He did. Declined. I pulled up my banking app. My hands were shaking so bad I mistyped my password twice. When the screen finally loaded, I gasped. The balance was $12.40. I scrolled through the transaction history. A withdrawal had been made 4 hours ago. A transfer to C&H Events Planning, $15,000. Another transfer to Liquor World, $4,000. My mother. My mother was a joint signer on this old account. She had seen the money land and she had drained it. She had stolen the money for my husband's funeral to pay for my sister's liquor and party planner. I felt a scream building in my throat, but I swallowed it down. It tasted like bile and betrayal. I am so sorry, I told Mr. Henderson, my face burning with shame. I have to make a phone call. I will be back. I walked out of the funeral home and into the humid Atlanta heat. I did not cry. Tears were for people who had hope. I had nothing left but a cold, hard rage. I got into Julian's 10-year-old Toyota Camry and drove. I did not drive home. I drove straight to the gated community in Buckhead, where my parents were currently staying with Chantel. The drive took 30 minutes. 30 minutes to think about every sacrifice I had made. I was the one who paid off my parents' mortgage. I was the one who paid for Chantel's tuition, which she wasted on a degree in fashion marketing she never used. I was the reliable one, the safe one, the ATM. When I pulled up to the house, the driveway was full. Hunter's leased BMW, my dad's Cadillac. A delivery van for a high-end catering company was just leaving. The house looked magnificent. White columns, manicured lawn, a fountain bubbling in the center of the circular driveway. It was a house that screamed old money. I stormed through the front door without knocking. The smell hit me instantly. Garlic butter, Cajun spices, and expensive cologne. They were in the dining room. I walked in. My mother, Patricia, was holding a glass of white wine. My father, Raymond, was tucking a napkin into his collar. Chantel was laughing, throwing her head back. And Hunter, my brother-in-law, was sitting at the head of the table cracking a lobster claw. The laughter died instantly when they saw me. I must have looked like a ghost. My hair was messy, my eyes were swollen, and I was wearing the same black dress I had worn for 3 days. Dominique, my mother said, putting her glass down. We were not expecting you. I thought you were busy with arrangements. Where is my money? I asked. My voice was deadly quiet. My father frowned. Hello to you too. Is that how you greet your family? I looked at my mother. You took $20,000 from the joint account. That was for Julian's funeral. That was for his casket. My mother sighed the way one sighs at a toddler throwing a tantrum. Dom, lower your voice. You are upsetting Chantel. I stepped closer to the table. I grabbed the bottle of wine cooling in the ice bucket. It was a Chardonnay that cost $200. You stole money from a widow to buy alcohol. I slammed the bottle back down. Ice water splashed onto the table. Hey, Hunter stood up, wiping butter off his chin. Watch the furniture, Dom. This is Italian marble. And watch your tone. Mom didn't steal anything. It was a joint account. That means the money belongs to everyone. It was my savings. I screamed, finally losing control. I transferred it yesterday, and we borrowed it, my mother said, standing up to match my intensity. Borrowed, Dominique. We needed to pay the caterer. The deposit was due, or they were going to cancel. Do you want your sister's housewarming to be a disaster? Do you want her to look poor in front of Hunter's boss? You chose a party over burying my husband. Julian is dead, Chantel shouted from across the table. She stood up, smoothing her silk dress over her stomach. He is dead, Dom. He does not care if he gets buried on Saturday or next Tuesday. He does not care if he is in a mahogany box or a pine crate. But I am alive. My reputation matters. This party is the future of this family. I looked at them, really looked at them. My father, who had retired early because I paid his bills, was busy saving a piece of lobster meat from the splash I had caused. He didn't even look at me. You are selfish, Dominique, my father grumbled, dipping the meat in butter. Always have been. Always keeping score. Your sister needs this win. Julian was a simple man. He would not want you wasting 20 grand on a funeral anyway. Hunter laughed. A short, cruel bark of the laugh. Exactly. Honestly, Dom, hearing you talk about expensive caskets is funny. Julian drove a beater car. He probably would feel more comfortable in a pine box. Let me finish this tale and maybe I will write you a check for a couple $100. You know, to help out the needy. He smirked at me. That arrogance. That absolute unearned confidence. Hunter, a man who had failed 3 startups and was currently drowning in credit card debt that he hid from everyone but me. He was sitting there eating lobster paid for with my money in a house he thought he owned, mocking the man who made it all possible. Something snapped in my chest. It wasn't a loud snap. It was a quiet final click, like a lock turning. I looked at the lobster shell on Hunter's plate. I looked at the wine in my mother's hand. I looked at the fear in Chantel's eyes, not fear of me, but fear that I might ruin her party. Get out, my father said, waving his fork. Go home, Dominique. You are being hysterical, and you are ruining dinner. We will discuss the money next week after the party is over. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. I suddenly felt very calm. Okay, I said. I looked at each of them one last time. Enjoy the meal. It is the last one you will ever eat in this house. I turned around and walked out. What is that supposed to mean? Chantel yelled after me. Dom, do not you dare create drama on Saturday. I walked out the front door, past the fountain, past the BMWs and the Mercedes. I got into Julian's old Toyota. I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a small velvet bag. Inside was a set of keys. Not the keys to this car. Keys to a safety deposit box at the First National Bank. Julian had given them to me a month ago. He had said, if anything ever happens to me, and if your family ever tries to cross you, open the box. I wiped the last tear from my cheek. I started the engine. The funeral home was closed now, but the bank would open at 9 a.m. tomorrow. My family thought Julian was a broke nobody. They thought I was a pushover. They were about to find out that they had been living inside the belly of a sleeping dragon, and the dragon just woke up. The next morning, the Atlanta sun was already baking the pavement as I pulled into my parents' circular driveway. The house was quiet, which was a rare blessing. I knew my mother and Chantel were out at the salon getting mani-pedis for the party, and my father was likely at the country club pretending he could afford the membership dues. I had a key one I had kept on my ring for emergencies, though lately every interaction with my family felt like a catastrophe waiting to happen. I was not there to fight. I was on a mission. I needed Julian's suit. It was the charcoal gray 3-piece suit he had worn at our wedding. It was the only expensive piece of clothing he owned, and we had stored it in the cedar closet at my parents' house 2 years ago when our apartment was being fumigated. We just never took it back because Julian hated dressing up. He preferred his comfortable cotton shirts and jeans. But for his final rest, he deserved to look like the king he was to me. I wanted him to look dignified. I wanted him to look like the man who had silently built an empire while everyone else dismissed him. I let myself in. The house smelled of stale perfume and cleaning products. I walked straight to the cedar closet in the hallway, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. I opened the door expecting to see the garment bag hanging neatly in the back. It was empty. My heart skipped a beat. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked at my skin. Maybe they moved it. Maybe my mother put it in the guest room closet. I tried to rationalize it, but a sinking feeling in my gut told me something was wrong. I walked toward the guest room, the one Hunter had been occupying for the last 3 months since he and Chantel claimed their own house was being renovated. The door to the guest room was slightly ajar. As I pushed it open, the smell hit me first. It was a sour, cloying mix of expensive bourbon sweat and vomit. The heavy curtains were drawn, blocking out the light, but I could see the chaos. Clothes were scattered everywhere. Empty pizza boxes were stacked on the nightstand. And there, lying in a crumpled heap on the floor near the foot of the bed, was something gray. I froze. I did not want to step forward. I did not want to confirm what my eyes were seeing. But I forced my legs to move. I knelt down on the plush carpet. It was Julian's suit. The garment bag had been ripped open and tossed in the corner. The jacket, the beautiful charcoal wool that I had once smoothed over my husband's broad shoulders, was twisted and stained. A dark, crusty patch of red wine had soaked into the lapel, stiffening the fabric. But that was not the worst part. The trousers were tangled in a pile of dirty laundry, and there was a distinct acidic stain on the leg that smelled unmistakably of sickness. My breath caught in my throat. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. This was not just a piece of clothing. This was the last thing I was going to see my husband in. This was the image I wanted to carry with me forever. And they had treated it like a rag. They had used my dead husband's wedding suit as a party prop. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and touched the ruined fabric. Tears blurred my vision, hot and stinging. How could they? How could anyone be this heartless? Suddenly, the front door downstairs slammed shut. Loud voices echoed in the foyer. "Bro, I am telling you that tequila shots contest was a bad idea," a male voice boomed. It was Hunter. "Stop whining," Chantel's voice replied. "You are the one who wanted to impress the bartender. Just go take a shower before Mom gets back. You smell like a distillery." I heard their heavy footsteps coming up the stairs. I stood up, clutching the ruined jacket to my chest. I did not try to hide. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to see exactly what they had done. Hunter appeared in the doorway first. He was wearing nothing but boxer briefs and a silk robe that was open at the chest. His hair was a mess, and his eyes were bloodshot. He stopped when he saw me, blinking slowly, as if trying to focus. "Whoa," he mumbled, leaning against the doorframe for support. "Dom, what are you doing in my room? Creepy much?" Chantel pushed past him, holding a Starbucks cup. She stopped dead when she saw what I was holding. "Oh, great," she sighed, rolling her eyes. "The Grim Reaper is back." "What do you want now, Dom? We told you no money until next week." I held up the jacket. The wine stain was visible even in the dim light. "You wore this," I whispered, my voice shaking with a rage so intense it felt like it might burn through my throat. "You wore Julian's suit." Hunter scratched his stomach, looking unbothered. He let out a short, dry chuckle. "Oh, that. Yeah, my bad. We were playing dress-up last night. I needed something to look classy for a skit we were doing on TikTok. I spilled a little Merlot on it. No big deal." A little Merlot. I stepped forward, thrusting the jacket toward him. "It is ruined, Hunter. This is what I was going to bury him in. This is his wedding suit." "Relax," Dom, Chantel shouted, stepping between us. "God, you are so dramatic. It is just fabric. Send it to the dry cleaners. Or better yet, just buy a new one." "Oh, wait, you can't because you are broke right now. It has vomit on it," I said, my voice cracking. "You threw up on my husband's suit." Hunter shrugged, looking bored. "Look, I was wasted, okay? I thought it was just some old rags Mom was throwing out. How was I supposed to know it was the holy shroud of St. Julian? Besides, the guy is dead, Dom. He is literally a corpse. I promise you, he does not care if he is wearing wine stains or Gucci. He is going to rot in the ground either way." The room went silent. The cruelty of his words hung in the air like toxic smoke. He grinned at me, a lopsided, drunken grin that showed absolutely zero remorse. He enjoyed this. He enjoyed seeing me in pain. He felt powerful by disrespecting the only man who had ever made him feel inferior. I wanted to scream. I wanted to claw his face. I wanted to tear this entire house down brick by brick. But a voice inside my head, Julian's voice, told me to stop. Do not engage Dom. Do not let them see you bleed. Strategy over emotion. I took a deep breath. The air shuddered in my lungs. I looked at Hunter, then at Chantel. You are right, I said softly. My calmness seemed to confuse them. Hunter blinked, his smirk faltering for a second. I am right, he asked. Yes, you are right. He does not care. I stooped down and picked up the trousers and the vest from the floor. I bundled the ruined suit into a ball. I would not let them see me cry over it. I would clean it myself. I would scrub every inch of it with my own hands if I had to. Well, good, Chantel said, checking her nails. Glad we are on the same page. Now get out. I need to steam my dress for the party and your negative energy is making me nauseous. I turned to leave. As I gripped the jacket tighter, my knuckles brushed against the inside pocket of the breast. I felt something hard, something small and cold. I paused. Julian never left things in his pockets. He was meticulous. What Hunter asked annoyed. Why are you stopping? Nothing, I said. I squeezed the object through the fabric. It was unmistakably a key. It was flat with a distinct square head. It wasn't a house key. It felt heavy, substantial. I remembered suddenly that Julian had worn this suit only once after our wedding. It was 3 months ago when he went to a private meeting with a banker from Zurich who was visiting Atlanta. He had come home that night, hung the suit up, and never mentioned it again. I hid the surprise on my face. I kept the bundle tight against my body so they couldn't see the outline of what I had found. I will get out of your way, I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. Have a great party. Yeah, whatever, Hunter muttered, turning back toward his bed. Just don't steal the towels on your way out. I walked out of the room, down the stairs and out the front door. I did not look back. My heart was pounding against my ribs, not from grief this time, but from adrenaline. As soon as I was in the safety of my car, I unfolded the jacket. I reached into the pocket and pulled it out. It was a silver key. It looked industrial. On one side there was a bank logo I recognized, First National Private Wealth. On the other side, etched into the metal, was a number 402. I gripped the key until it dug into my palm. Hunter had worn this suit. He had worn it, vomited on it, and mocked it. But in his drunken arrogance, he hadn't checked the pockets. He had been wearing the key to his own destruction all night, and didn't even know it. I looked back at the house. I could see Chantel in the window holding up her dress, preening for her imaginary audience. Keep laughing, I whispered to the glass. I put the key in my purse and started the engine. The suit was ruined, but Julian had left me something much more powerful than fabric. He had left me a way out, and I was going to use it. I stood in the hallway, the bundle of Julian's ruined suit pressed against my chest like a shield. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run out of that house and never breathe the same air as these people again. But Chantel was not done with me yet. She was standing at the top of the stairs, blocking my path, a garment bag in her hand. Her face was flushed with the excitement of a child, about to show off a new toy, completely oblivious to the fact that she had just allowed her husband to desecrate a dead man's clothing. Wait, she commanded, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. You have to see this. Since you are already here ruining the mood, you might as well make yourself useful and give me an opinion. I did not want to look. I wanted to turn my back on her. But something in her tone, a mixture of malice and vanity, made me freeze. She unzipped the bag with a dramatic flourish. Voila, she said, pulling the plastic away. I felt the air leave my lungs. It was a gown. A floor-length, off-the-shoulder masterpiece made of ivory silk and French lace. The bodice was embroidered with tiny, delicate pearls arranged in the shape of calla lilies, my favorite flower. The fabric shimmered under the chandelier light, looking like woven moonlight. It was not just a dress. It was a work of art. and I recognized it. My knees nearly buckled. I had to reach out and steady myself against the banister. I knew every stitch of that dress. I knew the curve of the neckline and the way the train was designed to flow like water. 6 months ago, on a rainy Sunday morning, I had walked into Julian's home office to bring him coffee. He had quickly covered a sketch pad with a newspaper looking guilty. I had teased him, snatching the paper away. Underneath was a drawing of this exact dress. He had blushed, his ears turning pink, and told me it was a secret project for our 10th anniversary, which was coming up in 2 weeks. He said he had hired a private designer in Milan to make it for me. He wanted me to feel like a queen just once. But then the aneurysm happened, the ambulance, the hospital, the funeral planning. The anniversary date had passed while I was sitting in an ICU waiting room praying for a miracle that never came. I had forgotten about the dress in the tsunami of my grief, but here it was, hanging from my sister's hand. Chantel saw me staring. She mistook my horror for jealousy. "I know, right?" she beamed, holding the dress up against her body. "It is stunning. I mean, white is a bold choice for a housewarming, but I am the lady of the manor now. I deserve to stand out. Hunter says I look like an angel in it." "Where did you get that?" I whispered. My voice was so quiet I barely heard it myself. Chantel shrugged carefully, zipping the bag back up to protect the silk from the humidity. "Oh, it is a funny story, actually. I was looking through Julian's desk the other day, trying to find some paper to write down the guest list. I found a receipt and a pickup slip for a custom dressmaker downtown. I figured he must have ordered something for you. But let's be honest, Dom. You are not exactly the gala type. You would probably wear this to a library fundraiser." She laughed, a light tinkling sound that grated against my nerves. So I went to the shop. I told them I was Mrs. Brooks. The designer was so confused she kept saying the measurements were different, but I told her I had lost weight from stress. A few alterations and boom, it fits me like a glove. It cost a fortune, by the way. Good thing Julian paid for it up front. Consider it his parting gift to his favorite sister-in-law. I felt physically ill. She had not just stolen a dress. She had stolen a memory. She had stolen the last romantic gesture my husband had ever made for me. She had impersonated me, walked into that shop, and taken the physical embodiment of Julian's love, and she was going to wear it to celebrate a house she did not own, paid for by the man she mocked. The level of violation was so deep, so profound, that I couldn't even find the words to scream. It was as if she had dug up his body and stolen the rings off his fingers. Chantel stepped closer, her expression shifting from vanity to sternness. She pointed a manicured finger at my chest. "Now listen to me, Dom. This is important. Since I am wearing white, and I am the star of the show, I need to set some ground rules for Saturday." "Rules?" I repeated, staring at the bag. "Yes, rules. First of all, do not be late. Second, and this is non-negotiable, you cannot wear black." I looked up at her face. "What?" "No black," she said firmly. "I know you are in mourning or whatever and you want everyone to feel sorry for you. But this is a happy occasion. I do not want you standing in the corner looking like a crow and bringing down the vibe. If you come, you wear pastels. Beige, light pink, maybe a soft yellow. You need to blend in. You are background Dom. I am the foreground. Do you understand?" I stared at her. She was demanding that I, a widow of less than a week, take off my mourning clothes and dress up like an Easter egg so I wouldn't distract attention from her stolen glory. She wanted me to fade into the wallpaper. She wanted me to be invisible. In that moment, the rage that had been boiling inside me cooled into something solid. It became ice. It became steel. I felt the weight of the key in my pocket, the key to the safety deposit box, the key to the truth, the key to JD Holdings. Chantel thought this was about a dress. She thought this was about a party. She had no idea that she was standing on a trapdoor and I was holding the lever. She wanted me to blend in. She wanted me to follow orders. I looked at the white dress one last time. It was beautiful, but it was tainted now. I didn't want it back. Let her wear it. Let her wrap herself in the stolen love of a man she hated. It would make the ending so much sweeter. I stood up straighter. I smoothed down the front of my black dress. I wiped the expression of shock from my face and replaced it with a mask of absolute compliance. "Okay," I said softly. Chantel blinked, surprised by my sudden surrender. "Okay. You agree?" "Yes," I said. "You are right, Chantel. It is your big day. I shouldn't make it about me. I won't wear black." She smiled a smug, victorious smile. "Good. I am glad you are finally being reasonable. Just wear something forgettable." "Okay," I nodded. "Forgettable. Sure." I turned and walked toward the door. My hand was clutched tight around the key in my pocket. I wouldn't wear black. Black was for mourning. Black was for sadness. Black was for the wife who had lost everything. But that wife was gone. She had died the moment she saw the vomit on Julian's suit. The woman walking out of the door was someone else entirely. I stepped out into the bright, blinding sun. I walked to my car. As I sat in the driver's seat, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were dry. My jaw was set. I pulled out my phone and opened the browser. I typed in the name of the most exclusive boutique in Buckhead. I wasn't going to look for beige. I wasn't going to look for pink. I was going to find the brightest, boldest, most dangerous shade of red they had. Chantel said no black. She didn't say anything about the color of blood. She didn't say anything about the color of fire. I started the car. The engine of Julian's old Toyota roared to life. I wasn't going to a funeral on Saturday. I was going to a war. And I was going to be dressed for the slaughter. First National Private Wealth was not the kind of bank where you stood in line behind velvet ropes waiting for a teller. It was a fortress of limestone and glass in the center of the financial district, a place that smelled of mahogany espresso and old money. I parked Julian's battered Toyota between a Bentley and a Porsche, feeling a fresh wave of nausea roll over me. For the entire drive over, my mind had been spinning with catastrophic scenarios. I knew Julian was secretive about money, but I always assumed it was because we did not have any. We lived simply. We clipped coupons. We rarely ate out. Now holding a key to a private vault in a bank that required a minimum deposit of $5 million just to open an account, I was terrified. What if Julian had a secret life? What if he had gambled everything away? What if this box contained nothing but loan shark notes and debt that would bury me along with him? I smoothed down my dress and walked inside. The lobby was silent, the kind of heavy silence that usually accompanies vast amounts of wealth. A receptionist looked up from a marble desk. Before I could even speak, a man in a bespoke navy suit approached me. He looked like he cost more than my car. "Brooks," he said, extending a hand. "I am Mr. Sterling, your husband's account manager. Please accept my deepest condolences." We were devastated to hear the news. I shook his hand, bewildered. "You knew, Julian." Mr. Sterling smiled sadly. "Julian was one of our most brilliant clients, and one of our kindest. He spoke of you constantly. Please follow me." He led me not to a cubicle, but to a private elevator. We descended into the basement, the air growing cooler and smelling faintly of steel and ozone. We walked down a long corridor lined with metal boxes until we reached number 402. Mr. Sterling inserted his master key into the lock. I inserted the silver key I had found in the ruined suit. We turned them in unison. The mechanism clicked with a heavy, satisfying sound. Mr. Sterling pulled the long metal drawer out and carried it to a private viewing table in the center of the room. "I will give you some privacy," he said, and quietly retreated, closing the heavy steel door behind him. I was alone. Just me, the hum of the ventilation system, and the metal box that held the last secrets of the man I thought I knew. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely lift the lid. I took a breath and flipped it open. I expected cash, maybe a few stacks of bills he had squirreled away. I expected perhaps a watch or some family heirloom. What I saw was paper. Stacks and stacks of legal documents bound in leather folders. I reached for the first one. The cover read, Articles of Incorporation. I opened it. The company name stared back at me in bold black letters. J.D. Holdings, LLC, J.D., Julian and Dominique. I frowned. I flipped through the pages. This company was registered 10 years ago, 2 years after we were married. I looked at the financial statements attached to the back. My eyes widened. I blinked, sure I was misreading the numbers. Assets under management. $52 million. The room spun. I had to grip the edge of the table to keep from falling. 52 million. My husband, the man who wore generic brand sneakers and fixed the toaster with duct tape because he didn't want to buy a new one, was worth $50 million. He wasn't a data entry clerk. He was an angel investor. I flipped through the portfolio. He owned shares in tech startups, biomed companies, and logistics firms. He had built an empire in total silence while my family mocked him for being a nobody. Why, I whispered to the empty room. Why didn't you tell me? I set the portfolio aside and saw a thick envelope underneath. It was labeled Real Estate Deeds. I opened it. There were deeds to commercial buildings, apartment complexes, and warehouses. But the document on the very top made my heart stop beating in my chest. It was a property deed for a residential estate. The address was 1402 Oakwood Drive, Buckhead, Georgia. I knew that address. I had been there yesterday. I had been kicked out of there yesterday. It was Chantel's house. I read the document frantically. The owner of record was J.D. Holdings. The purchase date was 6 months ago. My mind flashed back to the day Chantel announced she and Hunter were buying the mansion. She had bragged about Hunter's tech company finally taking off. She had sneered at our rented apartment. But Hunter hadn't bought it. Hunter didn't have a dime. Julian had bought it. Underneath the deed was a lease agreement. I pulled it out. It was a residential lease between J.D. Holdings and Hunter Wilson. The monthly rent was listed as $1. $1. Julian had bought the house and let them live there for free. He had let Hunter pretend to be a big shot. He had let Chantel play the role of the rich housewife. He had subsidized their entire fantasy life while they treated him like dirt. Why would he do that? Why would he let them humiliate him in his own house? I found the answer at the bottom of the box. A handwritten letter sealed in a plain white envelope. On the front, in Julian's messy, familiar scrawl, it said, For my beloved Dom. Read only if I am gone. I tore it open. Tears immediately blurred my vision as I heard his voice in the words. My dearest Dom. If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and I am so sorry I left you alone with them. I know you are confused. You are probably angry that I hid this from you. Please forgive me. I grew up with money, Dom. I saw what it did to people. I saw how it turned family into sharks. When I met you, I wanted to be loved for who I was, not what I could buy. And you did. You loved me when I had nothing but a used car and a dream. You are the only real thing in my life, but I saw how your family treated you. I saw how they drained you. I knew that if they knew about the money, they would never let you go. They would bleed us dry. So I kept us hidden. I kept us safe in our simple life. As for the house in Buckhead, I know Hunter is a fraud. I know his business is a failure. I bought the house and let him pretend to own it for one reason: to buy you peace. I thought if I gave them what they wanted, they would finally leave you alone. I thought if they felt superior, they would stop hurting you. But I also prepared for the worst. I knew that one day their greed might turn on you. Hunter is not the owner, Dom. He is a tenant. And he is a tenant on a very short leash. I looked at the bottom of the box. There was one last item, a thick red envelope. It looked ominous. It looked dangerous. I picked up the letter again to read the final paragraph. If you are reading this because I died of old age and we lived a happy life, burn the red envelope. But if I am gone suddenly, and if your family has betrayed you, if they have chosen their vanity over your grief, then open the red envelope. Inside is the legal weapon I built for you. It contains the eviction notices, the revocation of the trust, and the proof of Hunter's embezzlement from the startup funds I gave him. Dom, you are the CEO of JD Holdings now. You are not their victim. You are their landlord, and you have the right to evict. I love you forever. Julian. I put the letter down. Sobs racked my body, violent and shaking. He had done all of this for me. He had swallowed his pride, endured their insults, and played the fool for years, just to shield me from their parasitic nature. He had bought them a mansion just to keep them off my back. And how did they repay him? By partying on his grave, by vomiting on his wedding suit, by calling his funeral a minor event. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. The sadness was evaporating, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I reached into the box and picked up the red envelope. It was heavy. It felt like a loaded gun. I ran my thumb over the seal. Julian had given me a choice. I could walk away with the $50 million and leave them in their fantasy. Or I could honor his final wish. I thought about Chantel's white dress. I thought about Hunter's smirk. I thought about my mother stealing the funeral money. I ripped the red envelope open. Inside were papers drafted by the top law firm in the city. Eviction notice. Notice of default. Civil lawsuit for fraud. I looked at the date on the eviction notice. It was blank. All I had to do was fill it in. I took a pen from the table. My hand was steady now. I wrote in tomorrow's date. Saturday, the day of the party. I closed the box. I stood up. I wasn't just Dominique Brooks, the grieving widow, anymore. I was the CEO of JD Holdings, and I had some property management to attend to. The elevator ride to the 45th floor of the Sovereign Building took long enough for my ears to pop twice. I stepped out into the lobby of Moore & Sterling, the most prestigious law firm in Atlanta. The reception area was all glass and chrome, offering a panoramic view of the city skyline. Somewhere out there amidst the trees of Buckhead, my sister was currently steaming a stolen white dress and preparing to host the social event of the season in a house she did not own. I was led to the corner office. Darius Moore stood up from behind a desk that looked like it was carved from a single redwood tree. Darius had been Julian's best friend since college, though I had only met him a handful of times. Julian had always kept his worlds separate. Now I understood why. He wanted to keep Darius and the power Darius represented away from the toxicity of my family. Darius looked older than I remembered. His suit was impeccable, but his eyes were tired. He bypassed the handshake and pulled me into a hug. It was the first genuine embrace I had received since Julian died. "I miss him," Dom Darius said, his voice thick with emotion. "He was the best man I ever knew." He sat me down and poured a glass of water. Then his demeanor shifted. The grieving friend vanished, and the shark-like attorney appeared. He opened a leather folder on his desk. "We have a lot of paperwork to get through regarding the trust and the investment portfolio," Darius said. "But Julian gave me strict instructions. He said if you ever came to see me with the silver key, we were to skip the portfolio and go straight to the real estate assets, specifically the property on Oakwood Drive." He slid a document across the polished wood. It was the residential lease agreement for the mansion. I picked it up. My eyes scanned the standard legal jargon until I reached the section labeled Payment Terms. Monthly rent, $1, payable to JD Holdings, LLC. I stared at the number. $1. He gave it to them, I whispered, feeling a fresh wave of nausea. He let them live in a $3 million estate for less than the cost of a candy bar. Darius leaned forward, clasping his hands. "Julian called it a peace tax," Darius explained. "He told me that Hunter was drowning in debt. He knew your sister was obsessed with appearances. He figured if he gave them a stage to perform on, they would be too busy pretending to be rich to bother you. He wanted you to have a quiet life, Dom. He subsidized their ego to buy your happiness." I felt a tear slide down my cheek. Julian had been playing 4D chess while my family was playing checkers. He had absorbed their insults, their mockery, and their disdain, all while holding the deed to the roof over their heads. But Darius continued, his voice dropping an octave. Julian was generous, but he was not a fool. He knew who Hunter was, he knew who Chantel was, and he insisted on inserting a very specific, very non-standard clause into the lease. He called it the respect clause. Darius flipped the document to page 12. He pointed to a paragraph highlighted in yellow, Clause 13b, Clause 13. I read it aloud, my voice trembling slightly. Termination for cause. This lease agreement is contingent upon the tenant maintaining a standard of respectful conduct toward the landlord's agents, and the landlord's immediate family. Any act of public disparagement, verbal abuse, theft of property, or physical desecration of the landlord's assets or reputation shall constitute a material breach of this lease. In the event of such a breach, the lease is immediately void, and the landlord reserves the right to evict the tenant with 0 notice period. I looked up at Darius. 0 notice, 0. Darius confirmed. In Georgia, usually you have to give 30 to 60 days. But Hunter signed a waiver. He was so arrogant, so desperate to get into that house and show off to his friends, that he didn't even read the fine print. He signed away his tenant rights for the privilege of paying $1 a month. Darius looked at me, his eyes sharp and assessing. So Dom, I need you to tell me, has there been a breach? Have they disparaged Julian? Have they damaged his property? I thought about the phone call in the funeral home. I thought about Chantel calling Julian's burial a minor event. I thought about the stolen white dress. And then I thought about the gray suit lying on the floor, stained with Hunter's vomit and red wine. They wore his wedding suit as a costume, I said, my voice cold and steady. Hunter threw up on it. And then he told me that Julian was just a rotting corpse who didn't care. Darius's jaw tightened. A flash of anger crossed his face, but he suppressed it quickly, channeling it into professional resolve. That is desecration of property and malicious emotional distress, Darius said, reaching for his pen. That is a material breach. We have them, Dom. We have them cold. He pulled out a new document. It was a writ of possession and an emergency eviction notice. He signed it with a flourish and stamped it with the official seal of his firm. I can have the sheriff's department serve this on Monday morning, Darius said. We can have them out by noon. I looked at the eviction notice. Monday morning seemed too polite. Monday morning meant they got to have their party. Monday morning meant Chantel got to wear the stolen dress and pretend to be a queen for one more night. Monday morning meant Hunter got to impress his boss and secure his future based on a lie. No, I said. Darius paused. No, I don't want Monday. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. I looked out toward Buckhead. I could almost picture the tent being set up in the backyard. I could imagine the champagne chilling on ice bought with the money meant for Julian's casket. The party is tomorrow, I said, watching the cars crawl like ants on the highway below. Hunter's boss will be there, all of their friends, all of the people they have lied to for years. Darius swiveled his chair to face me. He smiled a slow, predatory smile that matched the cold fire burning in my chest. What time do you want to do this, Dominique? I checked my watch. I calculated the timeline. Guests would arrive at 6, cocktails at 7, speeches and toasts would be at 8. That was when they would feel the safest. That was when their egos would be swollen to the point of bursting. 8 p.m. I said, turning back to face him. I want them out by 8:30. Darius picked up his phone. I will call the sheriff. I will hire private security to handle the crowd. And Dom, yes. Wear something nice. You are the CEO of JD Holdings now. You should look the part for your first site inspection. I touched the red silk fabric of the dress I had bought earlier. It was currently sitting in a garment bag in the back of my car. Don't worry, Darius, I said. I will be dressed to kill. I walked out of the office. The elevator ride down felt different this time. My ears didn't pop. I felt grounded. I felt heavy. I felt like an anvil dropping from the sky, ready to crush everything beneath me. Julian had given me the weapon. Darius had loaded it. Now all I had to do was pull the trigger. It was Friday night, the eve of the double event that would tear my life apart. Outside my apartment window, the Atlanta skyline was a blur of amber lights and heavy rain, mirroring the storm that had been raging inside my chest for days. I sat on the floor of my living room, surrounded by silence. There were no flowers here. There were no casseroles from concerned neighbors. There was just me, a bottle of water, and the red envelope sitting on the coffee table like a dormant grenade. My phone sat next to it, the screen dark. I picked it up, feeling the weight of it in my hand. It felt heavier than usual, loaded with the potential to either save my family or destroy them. I unlocked it and opened the group chat. It was titled The Brooks Bunch, a name my mother had chosen years ago in a fit of nostalgic whimsy. The background photo was a picture of Chantel winning a beauty pageant in high school. I wasn't even in the frame. I scrolled up. The last 100 messages were all about the housewarming party. Photos of balloon arches, debates about whether to serve crab cakes or shrimp cocktails. Screenshots of the weather forecast with my mother praying for sunshine. Not a single person had mentioned Julian. Not one. It was as if he had never existed, or as if his death was just a minor scheduling conflict, like a dentist appointment that clashed with a spa day. I looked at the red envelope again. Julian's letter had been clear. He wanted me to use the legal weapons only if they betrayed me. A part of me, the part that was still the little girl who just wanted her mother's approval, wanted to believe that they weren't evil. Maybe they were just misguided. Maybe they were grieving in their own strange, selfish way. Maybe if I laid it all out for them plain and simple, they would wake up. I needed to give them one last chance. Not for them, but for me. I needed to know with absolute certainty that I had tried everything before I pulled the trigger. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed, deleted, and typed again. I didn't want to sound angry. I wanted to sound like a sister, like a daughter. Mom, Dad, Chantel, Hunter. I took a deep breath and continued typing. I am asking you one last time. Please, do not do this. Julian was part of this family for 10 years. He fixed the deck at the old house. He drove Dad to his dialysis appointments when no one else could. He loved you guys. Please postpone the party, just for one weekend. Come to the funeral tomorrow. Stand by me. We can celebrate the house next week. I need my family. Please. I hit send. The bubble turned blue. I stared at the screen, watching the little indicators that showed who had read it. Read by Mom at 8:02 p.m. Read by Chantel at 8:03 p.m. Read by Hunter at 8:03 p.m. Then the 3 dancing dots appeared. Someone was typing. My heart hammered against my ribs. Please, I whispered to the empty room. Please, just say okay. Please, just say you love me. The dots disappeared. Then they reappeared. This went on for agonizing minutes. They were discussing it. They were probably in a huddle in that stolen mansion debating how to handle the buzzkill sister. Finally, a message popped up. It was from Hunter. LOL. Dom, you are killing the vibe. The deck Julian fixed is crooked anyway. Just come have a drink and chill out. I stared at the screen. Hunter, the man who couldn't change a light bulb without calling a handyman, was criticizing the work of a man who built things with his bare hands. Then Chantel chimed in. We can't cancel Dom. The deposit for the DJ is non-refundable. That is $2,000. Are you going to reimburse us? Didn't think so. Stop making this about you. It is selfish. Selfish. The word cut deep. I had just found out my husband was a multimillionaire who had practically gifted them a life of luxury, and they were calling me selfish over a DJ deposit. Then a new notification appeared. It was an audio message from my mother. It was 2 minutes long. I hesitated. I knew my mother's voice. I knew how it could switch from honey to vinegar in a split second. But I had to hear it. I had to know. I pressed play. My mother's voice filled the quiet apartment. There was background noise, clinking glasses, jazz music, laughter. She was clearly already celebrating. Her voice was slurred thick with expensive Chardonnay. Dominique, listen to me and listen good. I am tired of this martyr act. You have been moping around all week like the world ended. People die, Dominique. It happens. But look at what is happening here. Look at your sister. She has finally made it. She has a mansion. She has a husband who is going places. She paused to take a sip of something. And let's be honest about Julian. I know you loved him, but the man was a leech, honey, a total leech. What did he ever really do for us? He came to Christmas dinner empty-handed. He drove that embarrassing Toyota that made the neighbors think we were struggling. He never had any ambition. He was happy being a nobody. And frankly, he dragged you down with him. You could have married a doctor or a lawyer. Instead, you settled for whatever he was. My stomach churned. A leech. She called the man who bought the roof over her head a leech. So no, she continued, her voice sharpening. We are not canceling. We are not postponing. Tomorrow is the housewarming. If you want to go bury your husband in the rain with a bunch of strangers, go ahead. But do not expect us to be there. And if you do decide to show up to the party afterwards, do not come empty-handed. Bring a gift. A real gift. Something that fits the aesthetic of the house. Don't bring some cheap casserole. The message ended with a click. I sat there frozen. The silence that followed was different than before. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was empty. It was the silence of a bridge that had just collapsed into the sea. A leech. She had called him a leech. Julian, who had quietly paid off my father's medical bills 3 years ago and let them believe it was an insurance error. Julian, who had set up a college fund for a nephew that didn't even exist yet. Julian, who had signed a lease for $1 a month so my mother could brag to her church friends about living in Buckhead. They didn't just hate him. They despised him. They despised him because he was quiet, and they mistook his silence for weakness. They despised him because he didn't flash money, and they mistook his humility for poverty. I looked at the red envelope. It didn't look like a grenade anymore. It looked like justice. I picked up the phone one last time. I didn't type a paragraph. I didn't beg. I didn't explain. I went into my contacts. I found the entry listed as Mom with a red heart emoji next to it. I hit edit. I deleted the heart. Then I scrolled down to the favorites list. I removed her. I removed Dad. I removed Chantel. I watched their names slide down into the alphabetical abyss of general contacts, right next to the dry cleaner and the plumber. I opened the group chat again. I typed 2 sentences. Understood. I will see you tomorrow. I put the phone down. I stood up and walked to the closet. I pushed aside my black morning dresses. I reached into the back and pulled out the garment bag I had brought home from the boutique earlier that day. I unzipped it just an inch, catching a glimpse of the blood-red silk inside. My mother wanted a gift. She wanted something that fit the aesthetic of the house. Well, the house was a lie, the lifestyle was a fraud, and the aesthetic was about to be destruction. I would bring her a gift, all right. I would bring her the truth, and I would wrap it in an eviction notice. I turned off the lights in the apartment. For the first time in 3 days, I didn't cry myself to sleep. I slept soundly. I slept like a baby. I slept like a CEO who had a very busy day ahead of her. Phipps Plaza in Buckhead was not just a shopping mall. It was a cathedral of commerce, a place where the air was scented with expensive perfume and the floors were polished marble that clicked sharply under the heels of Atlanta's elite. I walked through the glass doors, the air conditioning hitting my skin like a cold kiss. For the first time in years, I did not feel out of place. Usually, when I came here to buy a birthday gift for Chantel or a scarf for my mother, I felt like an imposter. I would count every penny, terrified of overdraft fees, sweating in my sensible work clothes, while women in designer athleisure looked down their noses at me. But today was different. Today, I was not Dominique the struggling admin assistant. I was Dominique the CEO of JD Holdings. I was the woman with the titanium American Express Centurion card sitting in her purse, a card with no spending limit and a weight that felt like armor. I was heading toward the designer wing when I heard a familiar grating laugh. It echoed off the glass storefronts, sharp and malicious. I froze. I knew that laugh. Oh my God, look who it is. The grieving widow decides to grace us with her presence. I turned slowly. Standing near the entrance of Neiman Marcus were Tiffany and Bianca Chantel's best friends and her bridesmaids for the housewarming party. They were dressed in matching pastel tennis outfits, holding green juices, looking like a pair of judgmental macarons. Tiffany stepped forward, looking me up and down with a sneer. She took in my black dress, my messy bun, and my lack of makeup. I thought you were too devastated to function, Tiffany said, snapping her gum. Chantel said you were crying poor, claiming you couldn't afford to pay for the funeral, yet here you are at Phipps. What did the life insurance check clear already? Bianca giggled, covering her mouth with a manicured hand. That is so tacky. Julian is not even in the ground yet, and she is already blowing his death benefits on shoes. I felt a flash of heat rise in my chest, but I pushed it down. These women were irrelevant. They were just symptoms of the disease that was my sister's social circle. Actually, I said, my voice calm and level, I am here to buy a gift for the party tomorrow, since Chantel insisted I bring something appropriate. Tiffany rolled her eyes. A gift? What are you going to get her? A candle? Just do everyone a favor and stay home, Dom. You are going to depress the whole party. Chantel is really stressed out trying to make sure everything is perfect for Hunter's boss. She does not need her gloomy older sister hovering around in cheap polyester. I smiled. It was a small, tight smile that did not reach my eyes. Don't worry, Tiffany. I wouldn't miss it for the world. And trust me, what I'm wearing tomorrow will be anything but gloomy. I turned on my heel and walked away before they could respond. I could hear them whispering behind me, calling me desperate, calling me pathetic. Let them talk. Tomorrow they would be witnesses. I walked straight into the most expensive boutique in the wing, a store that usually kept its doors locked to keep the riffraff out. The security guard eyed me suspiciously, but opened the door. Inside it was quiet. A sales associate, a woman with severe glasses and a tape measure around her neck, looked up from a display of silk scarves. She gave me a once-over, her eyes lingering on my scuffed flats. Can I help you find the sale rack? She asked, her tone suggesting the exit was a better option. It is in the back corner. I did not flinch. I walked straight to the center of the room where a single mannequin stood on a pedestal. It was wearing a dress that stopped my heart. It was red. Not a polite, cheerful cherry red. It was a deep, dangerous crimson, the color of fresh blood, the color of a warning sign. It was structured silk with a sharp, plunging neckline and a silhouette that looked like it was carved from fire. It was aggressive. It was beautiful. It was war. I want this one, I said, pointing to the mannequin. The sales associate raised an eyebrow. That is a runway piece, madam. It is $12,000, and we do not offer refunds if you realize you overextended yourself. I reached into my bag. My fingers brushed past the eviction notice and the lease agreement, finding the cold metal of the Centurion card. I pulled it out and held it up. The light from the chandelier caught the black titanium surface. The sales associate's eyes widened. She knew what that card was. She knew that card meant I could buy the entire store if I wanted to. Her demeanor changed instantly. Her spine straightened, and a fake eager smile plastered itself onto her face. Of course, madam. Right away. Let me get you some champagne while we prepare the fitting room. I didn't drink the champagne. I stood in the fitting room and zipped the dress up. It fit like a second skin. I looked at myself in the three-way mirror. The woman staring back at me didn't look like a victim. She didn't look like the scapegoat who paid everyone's bills. She looked powerful. She looked terrifying. I swiped the card. The transaction went through instantly. As I walked out of the store with the heavy garment bag, I saw Tiffany and Bianca still loitering by the fountain. Their jaws dropped when they saw the logo on the bag. They knew I couldn't afford that store. They looked confused, scared even. I didn't acknowledge them. I had more important business. I sat in my car in the parking garage and pulled out my phone. It was time for phase 2. I dialed a number I had found in Julian's contacts under security detail. It rang twice. "Hello, this is Eagle Eye Protection." "Hi," I said. "My name is Dominique Brooks. I am the CEO of JD Holdings. I need to hire a team for a private event tomorrow night." "What kind of event?" "Ms. Brooks, a hostile eviction," I said. "I need 4 men, big men. I need them in suits and I need them to look like they handle problems for a living. I am expecting resistance." There was a pause on the other end, then a professional hum of agreement. "We can do that. 4 operatives, unarmed but physically imposing. We will be there at 7. Perfect." I hung up and dialed the next number. This one was harder. It was Sheriff Earl Patterson. He had been Julian's fishing buddy. They used to spend Sundays on the lake talking about life. My family thought Earl was just some old redneck Julian knew. They didn't know he was the sheriff of Fulton County. Earl picked up on the first ring. "Dom, is that you? I heard about Julian." "I am so sorry, sweetheart. I was coming to the funeral tomorrow." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thank you, Earl. He loved you. But I need to ask you a favor. A professional favor. Anything, Dom. Name it." "I am serving an emergency eviction notice tomorrow night at the house on Oakwood Drive. The tenants have violated the lease and desecrated Julian's property. I have the paperwork from Darius Moore. It is all legal, but I need law enforcement presence to make sure it goes smoothly." There was a silence on the line. Earl knew who lived in that house. "Your parents?" Earl asked quietly. "Your sister?" "Yes." "Are you sure about this?" "Dom, once you do this, there is no going back." I looked at the red dress in the passenger seat. I thought about the vomit on the gray suit. I thought about the $1 rent. "I am sure, Earl. They called his funeral a minor event. They are partying in his house while his body is still cold." I heard Earl sigh a deep, heavy sound. Then I heard the click of a lighter. "All right, Dom. I will be there myself. Nobody disrespects Julian on my watch. I will see you at 8. I hung up the phone. It was done. The stage was set. The players were in position. I drove back to my apartment, the sun setting over the city. I carried the dress inside and hung it on the back of my bedroom door. I took a shower, scrubbing my skin until it was raw, washing away the smell of the funeral home, the smell of fear, the smell of the old Dominique. I wrapped a towel around myself and stood in front of the full-length mirror. I looked at my reflection. My eyes were dark, my jaw was set. I reached out and touched the red silk of the dress. Tomorrow, I whispered to the empty room. Tomorrow the grieving widow vanishes. The doormat disappears. I dropped the towel and stared at myself, vulnerable but strong. Tomorrow, the boss is born, and she is coming to collect the rent. Saturday morning broke with a sky the color of a fresh bruise. It was raining. Not a gentle cleansing shower, but a cold, relentless downpour that turned the Georgia red clay into thick mud. I stood under a black umbrella next to the open grave. The wind whipped the hem of my coat against my legs, but I barely felt it. I was numb. To my left stood Darius holding an umbrella over his head and mine. To my right stood Sheriff Earl Patterson holding his hat against his chest with water dripping from the brim onto his uniform. Behind us were 3 elderly men I recognized from the community center where Julian used to volunteer teaching math to at-risk youth. That was it. That was the entire congregation. 6 people. I looked at the row of empty folding chairs set up for the immediate family. They sat there like jagged teeth in a gaping mouth. My mother should have been in the first one, my father in the second. Chantel and Hunter should have been behind them. Instead, the chairs were slick with rain collecting puddles on the cold metal. They looked pathetic. They looked abandoned. The pastor was a kind man with a soft voice, but his words were being swallowed by the sound of the rain and the traffic from the nearby highway. He spoke of Julian's kindness. He spoke of his quiet strength. He spoke of the legacy of love he left behind. Legacy of love. I almost laughed. The only legacy my family cared about was the legacy of the wire transfer. My purse vibrated against my hip. It was a sharp, insistent buzz that cut through the somber atmosphere. I tried to ignore it. I wanted to focus on Julian. I wanted to say goodbye properly. But then it buzzed again. And again. A rapid-fire succession of notifications. I glanced at Darius. He gave me a small nod telling me it was okay to check. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, shielding it from the rain with my hand. It was Instagram. A notification popped up on the screen. Chantel Brooks is live. My thumb hovered over the screen. I should put it away. I should throw the phone into the grave along with the flowers. But a morbid curiosity gripped me. I needed to see. I needed to witness the depth of their depravity with my own eyes. I tapped the notification. The silence of the cemetery was instantly shattered by the tinny sound of upbeat pop music blasting from my phone speaker. I scrambled to turn the volume down, but not before the first few bars of a celebration anthem echoed off the gravestones. On the screen, the sun was shining. Chantel was using a filter that made everything look golden and soft. She was standing in the foyer of the Buckhead mansion. Julian's mansion. She was wearing a silk robe holding a mimosa in one hand and her phone in the other. Behind her, I could see a team of caterers setting up tables. I could see huge bouquets of white roses. I could see a banner that said, "New Beginnings." "Hey guys," she chirped into the camera, flashing a perfect white smile. "Happy Saturday. We are getting everything ready for the big reveal tonight. The energy here is so amazing. We are finally clearing out all the negative energy from this week. Out with the old, in with the new, right?" She spun around, showing off the living room. "Look at these flowers. Mom is helping with the centerpieces. Say hi, Mom." The camera panned to my mother, who was arranging lilies in a crystal vase. Lilies. The flower of death. The flower of funerals. She was using them for a housewarming party. "Hi, everyone," my mother waved, holding a glass of wine. "We are just so blessed. God is good." I felt a physical blow to my chest. They were drinking. They were laughing. They were celebrating at the exact moment Julian was being lowered into the ground. Then I saw the caption at the bottom of the video. It was written in bold, playful font with a sparkle emoji. "Goodbye, bad vibes. Hello, new life." Bad vibes. That was what she called my husband. That was what she called the man who had paid for the roof over her head. That was what she called the man who had silently funded her tuition, paid for her car, and bailed her husband out of debt. He was just a bad vibe to be exorcised so she could enjoy her stolen kingdom. I watched as Hunter walked into the frame. He wrapped his arms around Chantel's waist and kissed her cheek. "Can't wait for tonight, baby," he said. "We are going to own this town." I stared at their faces. They looked so happy. They looked so secure. They thought they had won. They thought that because I was quiet, I was weak. They thought that because I was grieving, I was defeated. I didn't feel the rain anymore. I didn't feel the cold. A strange heat started at the base of my spine and worked its way up. It wasn't the hot, messy heat of grief. It was the cold blue burn of absolute clarity. It was the feeling of a judge slamming a gavel. It was the feeling of a steel door locking shut. I closed the app. The screen went black, reflecting my own face back at me. I didn't recognize the woman in the reflection. Her eyes were hard. Her mouth was a thin line. She looked dangerous. The pastor finished his prayer. He looked at me expectantly. It was time for the ritual. The final goodbye. Mrs. Brooks, he said softly. The earth. I walked to the pile of dirt next to the grave. My heels sank into the mud, but I didn't care. I reached down. The soil was wet and heavy, clumping in my palm. It smelled of iron and decay. I walked to the edge of the grave and looked down. The mahogany casket gleamed in the dim light. It was the only beautiful thing in this entire wretched day. I am sorry they aren't here, Julian, I whispered. My voice was steady. It didn't shake. But you know what? I am glad. You don't need them. You never did. They are not family. They are parasites. And a parasite cannot survive without a host. I opened my hand. The dirt fell. Thud. 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 The sound was final. It was the period at the end of a sentence. It was the closing of a book. Rest now, I said softly. You have done enough. You protected me for 10 years. You carried the weight of their greed so I wouldn't have to. But the carrying is over. Now it is my turn to protect your legacy. I turned away from the grave. Darius stepped forward, offering me a handkerchief. I ignored it. I didn't need to wipe my eyes. There were no tears left. Are you ready to go home? Dom Darius asked gently. I looked at him. Then I looked at Sheriff Earl. Earl's face was grim. He had seen the video too. He knew what they were doing. I am not going home, Darius, I said. He looked confused. Where are you going? I looked toward the city, toward the skyline where the Sovereign building stood tall and gray against the rain. Then I looked toward Buckhead where the party was starting. I have a job to do, I said. I pulled the collar of my coat up. I walked toward my car, leaving the empty chairs behind me. They could stay there. They could rot in the rain, just like the relationship I used to have with my family. I got into the driver's seat. I checked the time. It was 4 in the afternoon. 4 hours until the party. 4 hours until the eviction. I started the engine. The radio came on, playing a soft jazz tune that Julian used to love. I turned it off. I needed silence. I needed focus. I gripped the steering wheel. My knuckles were white. You wanted a minor event, Chantel, I said to the empty car. You wanted to clear out the negative energy. Well, be careful what you wish for. I shifted the car into drive. Rest in peace, Julian. I am going to go take out the trash. The rain had finally stopped by the time I turned onto Oakwood Drive, leaving the street slick and black under the streetlights. The humidity hung heavy in the air, creating a halo around every lamp, making the entire neighborhood look like a movie set. And in the center of it all, sitting atop the highest hill in Buckhead, was the mansion. My mansion. From a distance, it looked spectacular. I had to give Chantel credit for one thing. She knew how to light a stage. The house was glowing. Golden uplights washed the white columns of the portico. Strings of fairy lights were draped through the ancient oak trees in the front yard. A spotlight swept across the facade, highlighting the architectural details that Julian had fallen in love with when he bought the property. It looked like a castle made of sugar, promising sweetness and light to anyone lucky enough to be invited inside. But I knew the rot that lived within the walls. I knew the foundation was built on lies and the roof was held up by the patience of a dead man. I slowed down as I approached the main gate. The line of cars waiting to get in was staggering. It looked like a showroom for a high-end dealership. There was a matte black Lamborghini Urus, a cherry red Ferrari, a silver Bentley. I recognized the license plate frames on most of them. They were from the premier exotic rental agency in downtown Atlanta. Hunter had gone all out. He had probably spent the last of his credit line renting these cars for his friends to park out front, creating the illusion that he was surrounded by fellow tycoons. I was driving Julian's 10-year-old Toyota Camry. The beige paint was fading on the hood. The bumper had a small dent from where a shopping cart had hit it 3 years ago. The engine made a low rhythmic ticking sound that I had come to find comforting. It was a humble car, an honest car, and right now it was sticking out like a sore thumb in this parade of vanity. I inched forward, the brake lights of the Ferrari in front of me bathing my windshield in red. I could see the guests inside, men in tuxedos, Women in glittering gowns. They were laughing, checking their makeup in the rearview mirrors, completely unaware that the woman in the beat-up sedan behind them held the power to turn off the lights on their party. When I finally reached the gate, a large man in a tight black security uniform stepped out of the booth. He held up a hand, his palm flat and dismissive. He didn't even look at my face. He just looked at the car. He looked at the dented bumper. He looked at the fading paint. And he sneered. He tapped on my window with a flashlight. It was a sharp, aggressive sound. I rolled the window down. The air conditioning from the guard booth wafted out, smelling of stale coffee. "Delivery entrance is round back," he barked, jerking his thumb over his shoulder. "And you are late. The caterers were supposed to be loaded in by 6. I looked at him. He was young, maybe 25, with a jawline that suggested he spent a lot of time at the gym and a demeanor that suggested he enjoyed exercising power over people he deemed inferior. He was exactly the kind of person Hunter would hire, someone who judged worth by appearance. "I am not with the catering company," I said calmly. My voice was low, barely rising above the hum of the engine. He shone the flashlight into the car, blinding me for a second. He swept the beam over the passenger seat, then back to my face. He saw my messy hair, which was still damp from the rain at the cemetery. He saw the trench coat I was wearing over my dress. He didn't see the red silk underneath. He just saw a woman who didn't belong. "Look, lady," he sighed, clearly annoyed. "This is a private event. VIPs only. We have a strict guest list and an even stricter vehicle policy. The boss doesn't want rust buckets cluttering up the driveway. It ruins the aesthetic. So unless you are here to unclog a toilet, turn this heap around, you are holding up the line." Behind me, a Porsche honked its horn. The driver threw his hands up in frustration. I didn't move. I didn't flush with embarrassment. The old Dominique would have apologized. The old Dominique would have parked down the street and walked up the hill in the mud just to avoid a confrontation. But the old Dominique was buried 6 feet under, next to her husband. I reached into the passenger seat. I picked up a manila folder. I opened it and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a photocopy of the warranty deed certified by the Fulton County Clerk's office. I held it out the window. The guard blinked. "What is this? I don't want your flyer. Take it," I said. He hesitated, then snatched the paper from my hand. He shined his flashlight on it. I watched his eyes scan the document. I watched the moment the arrogance drained out of his face, replaced by confusion, and then slowly by fear. He read the legal description of the property. He read the address. And then his eyes landed on the line I had highlighted in neon yellow. Owner of record J.D. Holdings, LLC. Sole proprietor, Dominique Brooks. He looked up at me. He looked at the car again. Then he looked at the paper. His brain was trying to reconcile the image of the beat-up Toyota with the legal reality that the woman driving it owned the $3 million of real estate behind him. I don't understand," he stammered, his voice dropping an octave. "Mr. Wilson said he was the owner. He said he built this place. Mr. Wilson is a tenant," I said, "and Mr. Wilson is a liar. Now look at that document again. Look at the name. That is my name." He swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed. "I am the landlord," I continued, my voice ice cold. "And I am here to inspect my property. Now you have 2 choices. You can keep this gate closed and explain to the sheriff why you denied access to the property owner, or you can open that gate, stand aside, and let me park my rust bucket wherever the hell I want." The honking behind me got louder. The guard looked at the line of cars, then back at me. He was sweating now. He realized he had just insulted the person who signed his paycheck, or at least the person who owned the ground he was standing on. "I am so sorry, Ms. Brooks," he said, stumbling over the words. "I didn't know. Nobody told me. I was just following orders." "Open the gate," I said. He scrambled back into the booth. He fumbled with the controls. A second later, the heavy wrought iron gate swung open with a majestic creak. I put the car in drive. I didn't speed up. I rolled forward slowly, deliberately. I drove past the guard, who was now standing at attention, looking terrified. I guided the Toyota up the winding driveway. The gravel crunched under my tires. I passed the fountain. I passed the manicured hedges. And then I reached the valet stand. Two valets in red vests rushed forward to open the doors of the Ferrari ahead of me. They looked confused when my car pulled up. One of them wrinkled his nose. I ignored them. I didn't wait for them to open my door. I drove past the valet stand right up to the front steps. There was a prime spot right next to the front door. It was currently occupied by a sleek silver McLaren. It was clearly the centerpiece of the display. Hunter wanted everyone to see it as they walked in. I maneuvered the Toyota. I pulled up right next to the McLaren. I parked so close that my driver's side door was almost touching its bumper. The valet ran over, waving his arms. "Ma'am, you can't park here. This is the display area. That is a $300,000 car. I killed the engine." The ticking sound stopped. Silence fell inside the cabin. I looked at the valet through the window. I smiled. It was a smile that had no warmth in it. I unbuckled my seatbelt. I reached for the door handle. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror one last time. My eyes were dry. My lipstick was perfect. "I am not here to park," I whispered to myself. "I am here to conquer." I kicked the door open. It swung wide, missing the McLaren by an inch. I stepped out onto the gravel. My heels sank slightly, but I found my balance. I stood up to my full height. I reached back into the car and grabbed the garment bag containing the eviction notices. I grabbed my purse, and then I buttoned my trench coat all the way to the top. Nobody could see the red dress yet. Nobody knew what was underneath the drab beige coat of the grieving widow. I tossed the keys to the stunned valet. "Keep it close," I said. "I won't be staying long. But when I leave, this will be the only car left in the driveway." I turned and walked up the stairs. The music was thumping from inside. I could hear laughter. I could hear the clinking of glasses. I reached for the heavy brass door handle. It was cold under my hand. Scene 10 was over. The rehearsal was done. It was showtime. The double mahogany doors of the grand ballroom swung open with a force that rattled the crystal droplets on the wall sconces. The sound was like a thunderclap interrupting a symphony. Inside the room, the air was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and the murmur of polite society. Hunter was in the middle of a toast, standing by the fireplace with a glass of champagne raised high. He was smiling at his boss, Mr. Sterling, oblivious to the fact that his reign as the king of Buckhead was about to end. Chantel stood next to him, shimmering in the stolen white dress, looking every inch the lady of the manor. I stepped across the threshold. I was flanked on my left by Darius Moore, whose briefcase looked like a weapon in its own right. On my right and behind me were the 4 security operatives I had hired. They were massive men wearing black suits that strained against their shoulders, moving with the silent, predatory grace of panthers. The room went quiet. Not a gradual hush, but an instant, terrified silence. The jazz band stopped playing mid-note. A waiter dropped a tray of canapes, and the crash of breaking china echoed like a gunshot. I stopped in the center of the foyer. I reached up and undid the top button of my beige trench coat, then the second, then the third. I kept my eyes locked on Chantel the entire time. I shrugged the coat off, letting it fall to the marble floor in a heap of discarded fabric. Underneath the beige was fire. The red dress was a scream in a room full of whispers. It was a violent crimson slash against the sea of pastels and creams that Chantel had mandated. It hugged every curve of my body, structured and sharp like armor made of silk. It was the color of blood. It was the color of danger. It was the color of a stop sign that everyone had ignored until it was too late. A collective gasp went through the room. I saw Tiffany and Bianca near the chocolate fountain, their mouths hanging open. They recognized the dress. They recognized the power. Chantel's face went from confusion to a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. She didn't see the lawyer. She didn't see the bodyguards. She only saw the dress. She saw that I had disobeyed her order. She saw that I had dared to be visible. She marched toward me, her white train sweeping across the floor, Her face was twisted into a snarl that ruined the angelic image she had spent all day curating. "You!" she shrieked, her voice cracked, breaking the silence. "You crazy, miserable witch! I told you. I told you specifically. No black. I said pastels only. Look at you. You look like a whore. You are ruining my color palette." She stopped 3 feet away from me, trembling with rage. She pointed a shaking finger at my chest. "Get out! Get out right now! You are doing this on purpose. You are trying to upstage me in my own house because you are jealous. Security, get her out of here." I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I let her scream. I let everyone see her lose control. I let everyone see the real Chantel, the spoiled brat beneath the silk. When she finally stopped to take a breath, I smiled. It was a smile that chilled the room. "I am not wearing black, Chantel," I said. My voice was calm, projecting effortlessly to the back of the room. "I followed your rules. I am not mourning anymore." "Then what is that?" she screamed, gesturing at my body. "What is that hideous color?" I took a step forward. The red silk rustled soft like a warning hiss. "This," I said, keeping my voice low and dangerous. "This is the color of the ink on your eviction notice. This is the color of the red stamp on the foreclosure papers. This is the color of destruction, Chantel. And I am wearing it for you." Hunter finally snapped out of his shock. He saw his wife being confronted. He saw his boss watching with a frown. He saw his carefully constructed facade cracking. The alcohol in his system, combined with his fragile ego, triggered the only response he knew: aggression. He set his champagne glass down on a waiter's tray with a slam. He stormed toward me, his face flushed red, pushing through the crowd of guests. "Who do you think you are?" he bellowed. "You think you can walk into my house and threaten my wife? I don't care who you brought with you. This is private property." He lunged at me. His hands were reaching for my shoulders, intending to shove me backward. He wanted to physically remove me. He wanted to show his boss that he was the alpha male, that he was in charge. He never touched me. Before his fingers could even graze the red silk, the lead security operative moved. It was a blur of motion. 1 second, Hunter was charging; the next, he was airborne. The bodyguard stepped in, grabbed Hunter's wrist, and used his own momentum against him. Hunter hit the marble floor with a sickening thud. The air left his lungs in a wheezing gasp. He lay there sprawled on his back, looking up at the ceiling, blinking in shock. The bodyguard stood over him, hands clasped calmly in front of his waist, looking like a statue. The room erupted. People screamed. Guests scrambled back, knocking over chairs. The illusion of the polite, sophisticated party was shattered instantly. Hunter's boss, Mr. Sterling, stepped forward, looking horrified. "Hunter," he said sharply, "what is the meaning of this?" Hunter scrambled to his feet, clutching his bruised arm. His face was purple with humiliation. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "Arrest her!" he screamed at the sheriff who had just walked through the door. "Sheriff Patterson, arrest this woman. She is trespassing. She assaulted me." Sheriff Patterson took off his hat. He looked at Hunter with a mixture of pity and disgust. He didn't move to arrest me. He moved to stand next to me. "I'm afraid I can't do that, son," Earl said, his deep voice carrying through the hall. "She isn't trespassing. You can't trespass on your own property." The room went silent again. The words hung in the air. Own property. I stepped around Hunter. I treated him like a piece of furniture, like a stain on the rug. I didn't even look down at him. My eyes were fixed on the small stage at the end of the room where the DJ booth was set up. I walked through the crowd. The guests parted for me like the Red Sea. They stared at me with wide, fearful eyes. They saw the dress. They saw the law enforcement. They saw the confidence. They knew something massive was happening, and they were terrified of being caught in the blast radius. I walked up the 3 steps to the stage. The DJ, a young kid with headphones around his neck, looked at me with terror. He saw the bodyguards behind me and immediately took his hands off the turntable. I reached out and took the microphone from the stand. It was heavy in my hand. It felt like a gavel. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw my mother clutching her pearls near the buffet. I saw my father looking for a back exit. I saw Chantel standing over Hunter, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. I saw Hunter's boss crossing his arms, waiting for an explanation. I tapped the microphone. Thump, thump. The sound echoed through the speakers, booming through the house that Julian built. I brought the microphone to my lips. "Good evening, everyone," I said. My voice was steady, amplified, filling every corner of the room. "I apologize for the interruption, but the party is over." I looked directly at the DJ. "Cut the music," I commanded. The DJ scrambled to press a button. The ambient house music died instantly. The silence that rushed in was absolute. It was the silence of a held breath, the silence of Judgment Day. I looked back at the crowd. I smoothed the skirt of my red dress. "You can turn the music off," I said softly into the mic. "Because the real show is just about to begin." I gestured to Darius. He opened his briefcase and pulled out the stack of documents. He walked toward the projector that had been set up to show a slideshow of Hunter and Chantel's fake life. "I am going to tell you a story," I said. "It is a story about a $1 lease, a stolen dress, and a funeral that was too minor to attend." I paused, letting the words sink in. "Get comfortable. You are not going to want to miss this." I stood center stage under the glare of the spotlight. The microphone in my hand felt cool and solid, a weapon of mass destruction disguised as a tool for amplification. Below me, Hunter was still groaning on the floor, nursing his bruised ego and his twisted wrist, while Chantel stood frozen, her face a mask of smudged mascara and dawning horror. The silence in the room was heavy, thick with the kind of tension that usually precedes an explosion. Darius, my faithful legal counsel, moved with the precision of a surgeon. He connected his laptop to the AV system that Hunter had so arrogantly set up to showcase his fake success. A moment later, the giant screen behind me flickered to life. The white light washed over the crowd, blinding them for a second, before the first image came into focus. I did not scream. I did not shout. I spoke with the calm, terrifying cadence of a CEO conducting a hostile takeover. "Exhibit A," I said, gesturing to the screen behind me. The image was crisp and high definition. It was a scan of a legal document. At the top, in bold, undeniable letters, it read, "Warranty Deed." For the last 3 years, I continued pacing slowly across the stage, my red dress trailing behind me like a river of blood. You have all been told a fairy tale. You have been told that Hunter Wilson is a tech genius. You have been told that this mansion, these grounds, and this lifestyle were the fruits of his labor. You have been told that he bought this estate with his own money. I paused, looking directly at Hunter's boss, Mr. Sterling, who was standing near the front row, his brow furrowed in confusion. "But fairy tales are for children." And looking around this room, I see only adults. Adults who deserve the truth. I pointed to the highlighted section on the screen. The owner of this property is not Hunter Wilson. It is not Chantel Wilson. The owner of record is JD Holdings, LLC. And if you look at the bottom of the document, you will see the names of the managing partners. I let the silence stretch, forcing them to read the names. Julian Brooks and Dominique Brooks. A ripple of whispers broke out across the room. I saw my mother clutching her chest, her face draining of color. She knew this, of course, but seeing it projected on a 20-foot screen in front of Atlanta's elite was a different kind of reality. My husband Julian, the man whose funeral you all refused to attend today, bought this house. He bought it with cash. He bought it because he loved me and because he took pity on a family that was drowning in debt and delusion. He was the silent architect of the life you see before you. He was the one who paid for the roof over your heads while you mocked him for driving a used car. Darius clicked the remote. The image on the screen changed. "Exhibit B," I announced. This document was less dignified. It was a standard residential lease agreement. but the terms were what caught everyone's eye. I walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at Hunter, who was now sitting up staring at the screen with the look of a trapped animal. "Hunter told you he was the king of this castle," I said, my voice dripping with disdain. "But in reality, he is a tenant. And not just any tenant. He is a charity case." I read the terms aloud, my voice echoing through the silent hall. Monthly rent, $1. The crowd gasped. I saw Tiffany and Bianca cover their mouths. I saw the men in tuxedos exchanging looks of disbelief. $1, I repeated. My husband charged him $1 a month, a symbolic gesture to help a struggling brother-in-law get back on his feet. "Julian subsidized your ego, Hunter. He paid the property taxes. He paid the insurance. He paid for the landscaping that you are so proud of. He let you play house in a multi-million-dollar estate because he was a kind, generous man." "And how did you repay him?" I signaled to Darius. "This brings us to Exhibit C," I said. "And for this one, I suggest you listen closely." The screen went dark for a second, and then a video file began to play. It was grainy black and white footage clearly taken from a security camera. I recognized the angle immediately. It was the living room of this very house taken 2 weeks ago. On the screen, Hunter was sitting on the couch holding a beer. Chantel was pacing back and forth. The audio was crystal clear. "I am telling you, babe, the boss is eating it up." Hunter's voice boomed through the speakers. "He thinks I am loaded. When he sees this house on Saturday, he is going to promote me to VP for sure. He has no idea I am broke." "But what about Julian?" Chantel's voice on the recording was shrill. "What if he wants to come over?" "Screw Julian," Hunter laughed, taking a swig of beer. "That loser. He is too soft to do anything. As long as I pay him his $1, he can't say anything. I own him. He is just my little bank account." "I just wish he would die already," Chantel said, checking her reflection in the mirror. "Then we could really take over. Dom is too stupid to manage the money. We could take it all." The video cut to black. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the kind of silence that feels physical, like all the oxygen had been sucked out of the space. I stood there letting the words hang in the air. "I just wish he would die already." I looked at Chantel. She was shaking her head frantically, mouthing the word no over and over again, but no sound was coming out. Then I heard a sound that broke the spell. Crash. It was the sound of expensive crystal shattering against marble. I looked down. Mr. Sterling, Hunter's boss, had dropped his champagne flute. The amber liquid was pooling around his polished shoes. His face was a shade of purple that I had never seen before. He looked at Hunter with eyes that promised murder. "You lied to me!" Mr. Sterling roared. His voice was not amplified, but it didn't need to be. It shook the walls. "You brought me here under false pretenses. You told me you built this company. You are a fraud, Wilson. You are a broke, lying fraud." Hunter scrambled to his feet, ignoring the pain in his arm. "Sir, please, it is out of context." She doctored the video. "It's a deepfake." Mr. Sterling held up a hand. "You are fired, Hunter. Do not come to the office on Monday. Do not put me as a reference. If I ever see you again, I will have security throw you out faster than this lady's bodyguards just did." The guests immediately began to pull out their phones. The flashes started going off like strobe lights. They were recording everything. This was not just a scene. It was the social execution of the year, and they wanted a front row seat. #housewarming from hell was about to trend worldwide. I raised the microphone to my lips one last time. "The party is over," I said. "But before you go, there is one last piece of business." I looked at the eviction notice in my hand. "This morning you called my husband's funeral a minor event. You said you wanted to clear out the bad vibes. You said you wanted a new beginning." I walked down the steps of the stage, approaching Chantel. She shrank back, terrified of the woman in the red dress. "Well, congratulations, little sister," I whispered loud enough for the microphone to catch. "You got your wish. The bad vibes are leaving, because the bad vibes are you." I turned to the sheriff. "Sheriff Patterson," I said, "these individuals are in breach of their lease. They have threatened the landlord. They have desecrated the property, and they are currently trespassing. I looked at Hunter and Chantel. This is not a housewarming party, I declared, my voice ringing with finality. This is a goodbye party. You have 30 minutes to pack your bags. If you are not off my property by 9 o'clock, the sheriff will escort you out in handcuffs. I turned to the stunned crowd. And as for the rest of you, get out of my house. Now! I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a deafening thud that echoed the final heartbeat of their fake lives. I turned my back on them and looked up at the screen where the name J.D. Holdings still glowed in bright white light. Justice had been served, and it tasted like champagne. The sound of the microphone hitting the floor was the final note of my performance, but the applause came in the form of a collective gasp that sucked the oxygen right out of the room. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating, like the air before a tornado touches down. I stood on the edge of the stage looking down at the wreckage I had caused. The projection screen behind me was still glowing with the evidence of their fraud, casting long distorted shadows across the marble floor. Hunter was the first to move. He scrambled up from the floor, clutching his bruised wrist, his face a mask of panicked sweat. He looked at the guests who were now holding their phones up, recording his humiliation for the world to see. He looked at me with pure hatred, but he didn't dare step forward again, not with my security team forming a wall of black suits between us. Instead, he turned his desperate eyes toward the one person who could salvage his financial life. "Mr. Sterling, please," Hunter stammered, taking a step toward his boss. His voice was high and thin, cracking under the pressure. "You have to listen to me. This is a misunderstanding. It is a family dispute. My sister-in-law is mentally unstable. She doctored those documents. She is trying to blackmail me." Mr. Sterling did not move. He stood like a statue carved from granite, his face rapidly turning a deep shade of crimson. He was a man who prided himself on integrity, on seeing through lies, and he had just realized he had been played for a fool in front of the entire Atlanta business community. He looked at the lavish decorations. He looked at the expensive champagne. And then he looked at the lease agreement still projected on the screen behind me. $1. Hunter reached out to touch Mr. Sterling's arm. "Sir, I can explain." The sound of the slap echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. It was violent and precise. Mr. Sterling's hand connected with Hunter's cheek with enough force to snap his head to the side. Hunter stumbled back, clutching his face, his eyes wide with shock. The crowd let out a collective shriek, but nobody moved to help him. "Do not touch me!" Mr. Sterling roared. His voice was not the polite voice of a boardroom executive anymore. It was the voice of a man who had been insulted to his core. "You brought me into this house. You introduced me to your wife. You looked me in the eye and told me you built a portfolio of assets. You told me you were a solvent partner." "Sir, I am," Hunter whimpered. "You are a fraud." Mr. Sterling spat the words out. "You are a liar and a thief. You tried to use my company's reputation to leverage a loan for a lifestyle you are renting for $1. Do you have any idea how illegal that is? Do you have any idea how finished you are? Please, sir, give me a chance to fix this." "You are fired," Mr. Sterling declared, his voice ringing with finality. "You are terminated effective immediately, and do not bother clearing out your desk. Security has already been notified to shred your keycard. If you show your face at my building again, I will have you arrested for corporate espionage. You are done in this town, Wilson. Nobody will hire you to sweep floors when I am done with you." Hunter stood there swaying slightly as his entire future evaporated in seconds. The six-figure salary, the potential partnership, the access to the elite circles. It was all gone. He was stripped naked in front of the very people he had tried so desperately to impress. Before Hunter could even process the magnitude of his unemployment, Sheriff Earl Patterson stepped forward. He moved with the slow, deliberate weight of the law. He adjusted his belt and placed a hand on his holster, not to draw his weapon, but to remind everyone of his authority. He walked past Mr. Sterling and stood directly in front of the trembling couple. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. It was the emergency eviction order signed by a judge less than 3 hours ago. Hunter Wilson and Chantel Brooks, the sheriff, announced his deep voice carrying to the back of the room. "By the authority of the Fulton County Sheriff's Office, I am serving you with an immediate order of vacate." Chantel finally found her voice. She pushed past Hunter, her face streaked with mascara and tears. "You can't do this," she screamed at the sheriff. "This is my house. My things are here, my friends are here. You can't just kick us out in the middle of a party. We have rights. We have tenant rights." Earl looked at her calmly. "Ma'am, according to the lease you signed, you waived your rights to a notice period in the event of a breach of contract, and desecrating the landlord's property and threatening the landlord with physical violence constitutes a severe breach." He pointed to the door. "You are currently trespassing on private property. The owner, Ms. Dominique Brooks, has requested your removal. You have exactly 15 minutes to gather your personal essentials and leave the premises. If you are not on the other side of that gate by the time I count to 10, I will place you both under arrest for criminal trespass and destruction of property." 15 minutes, Chantel shrieked. "But my clothes, my jewelry, my furniture, anything you leave behind will be considered abandoned property," Earl said, cold and professional. "Now move." Chantel looked around the room, frantically searching for an ally. She looked at her friends, Tiffany and Bianca, but they quickly looked away, pretending to be very interested in their shoes. She looked at our parents, but Mom and Dad were cowering near the buffet table, trying to make themselves invisible. She realized with terrifying clarity that she was alone. The entourage she had cultivated only loved the lifestyle, not her. She turned to Hunter, grabbing his lapels. "Do something," she hissed, shaking him. "You are the man. Fix this. Tell them to leave. Throw them out." Hunter looked at her. He looked at the red handprint fading on his cheek. He looked at his boss, who was currently on the phone, likely calling legal counsel to sue him. The shock in his eyes began to curdle into something else. Rage. Pure, misdirected toxicity. He needed a villain. He needed someone to blame for the fact that he was a failure. And I wasn't close enough to strangle, so he turned on the person closest to him. "Fix it!" Hunter laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You want me to fix it? You are the reason we are in this mess, Chantel." Chantel recoiled as if he had slapped her too. "Excuse me." "It was your idea," Hunter shouted, shoving her hands off his jacket. "You were the one who wanted the mansion. You were the one who said Julian was a pushover. You were the one who demanded the G-Wagon and the catered parties and the trips to Cabo. I told you we couldn't afford it. I told you we should save money. But no, Princess Chantel had to have the best." He turned to the crowd, gesturing wildly at his wife. "She made me do it," he yelled, his voice cracking. "I didn't want to sign that lease. She forced me. She said if I didn't get her this house, she would leave me. I only took the money from the company accounts to pay for her shopping addiction. She is a leech. She drained me dry." Chantel's mouth dropped open. The betrayal was absolute. The perfect couple, the love story they plastered all over social media, was dissolving into acid right before our eyes. "You liar!" she screamed, lunging at him. "You told me you were a genius. You told me you were going to be a millionaire. You used me. You used my family connections. You are a broke loser, Hunter. You are nothing without me." "I am nothing," Hunter roared, getting in her face. "I lost my job because of you. I am going to jail because of you. I wish I had never met you." They were screaming over each other now, spitting venom. Their faces twisted into ugly masks of hatred. They were tearing each other apart, accusing each other of every sin they had committed together. It was grotesque. It was pathetic. And it was exactly what they deserved. Sheriff Earl watched them for a moment, shaking his head in disgust. Then he unclipped the handcuffs from his belt. The metallic click cut through their shouting match. "All right, that is enough," Earl said. "Since you two can't seem to leave quietly, I am going to help you along." He grabbed Hunter by the shoulder and spun him around. "Hey, get off me!" Hunter shouted, struggling. "You are under arrest for disorderly conduct and resisting a lawful order," Earl said, snapping the cuffs onto Hunter's wrists. He looked at Chantel, who was backing away, trembling. "You too, Miss Brooks." Or should I say Mrs. Wilson? Let's go. One of the deputies stepped forward and took Chantel's arm. She started wailing a high-pitched sound of pure despair as the cold steel locked around her wrists. I stood on the stage watching them being dragged toward the door. They were kicking and screaming, blaming everyone but themselves. My mother let out a sob and tried to run toward them, but my father held her back, knowing that any interference now would only drag them down into the mud too. As they passed me, Chantel looked up. Her eyes were black with mascara, tears running down her face like war paint gone wrong. "Dom, please," she sobbed. "Dom, help me. He is hurting me. Dom, we are sisters." I looked down at her. I looked at the woman who had banned me from wearing black to my husband's funeral. I looked at the woman who had stolen a dress meant for a celebration of love. I brought the microphone to my lips one last time. "We were sisters, Chantel," I said, my voice echoing through the silent ballroom. "Now you are just a tenant who didn't pay the rent." I signaled the security team. "Take the trash out." The doors swung open and the rain and the darkness swallowed them whole. The party was officially over. The ballroom was in chaos, but for me the world had narrowed down to a single point of focus. Hunter was already in handcuffs, being led away by a deputy, his head hung low in defeat. But Chantel was still fighting. She was clinging to the doorframe of the main entrance, her fingernails digging into the wood, wailing like a banshee. She was refusing to cross the threshold, refusing to step out into the rain and the reality that awaited her. She looked like a fallen angel. Her white dress rumpled, her mascara running down her face in black rivers. I walked down the steps of the stage. My red heels clicked rhythmically on the marble floor, a sound that cut through her sobbing. The crowd parted for me again. They were no longer guests. They were spectators at a public execution, and they couldn't look away. I signaled to the sheriff to wait. "Hold on, Sheriff," I said, my voice projecting clearly through the silent room. "Before you remove Mrs. Wilson from the premises, there is one more matter we need to settle." Chantel looked up at me. Her eyes were red and swollen, filled with a mixture of hatred and terror. "What do you want now?" "Dom," she spat, her voice raspy. "You took my house. You took my husband. You ruined my life. What else could you possibly take?" I stopped 3 feet away from her. I looked her up and down slowly, letting my gaze linger on the white silk gown she was wearing. The gown with the pearl calla lilies, the gown Julian had designed for me, the gown she had stolen from a dead man's memory. "That dress," I said, pointing a manicured finger at her chest. Chantel looked down at herself, then back at me, clutching the fabric defensively. "What about it?" she snapped. "It was purchased with a supplementary American Express card issued to Julian Brooks," I said, my voice cold and clinical. "I checked the transaction history this afternoon. You forged his signature on the receipt at the boutique. That makes that dress stolen property. It is an asset of the J.D. Holdings estate, and as the executor of that estate, I am reclaiming it." Chantel's face went pale. She took a step back, shaking her head. "No," she whispered. "You can't be serious. I am deadly serious, Chantel. That dress cost $12,000. It belongs to me, and I am not letting you walk out of here with my property." I held out my hand, palm up. "Take it off." The room erupted in gasps. The guests who had been recording on their phones stepped closer, zooming in. This was the twist they hadn't expected. This was the moment the humiliation became absolute. Chantel looked around frantically. She looked at the sheriff, who stood with his arms crossed, his face impassive. She looked at the crowd, searching for a sympathetic face, but finding only morbid curiosity. "Dom, please," she begged, her voice cracking. "I can't take it off here. I am not wearing anything underneath except my shapewear. I will be naked. Please don't make me do this." "You should have thought about that before you stole it," I said, unmoved. "You wanted to wear white, Chantel. You wanted to be the center of attention. Well, look around. Everyone is looking at you. You have the floor." I stepped closer, invading her personal space. My red dress swished against her white one, the contrast violent and stark. "You have two choices," I hissed, so only she could hear. "You can unzip that dress right now and hand it to me. Or I can have the sheriff add grand larceny to your charge sheet. That is a felony, Chantel. You will go to prison for years. Is this dress worth 5 years in a cell?" Chantel began to shake violently. She looked at the sheriff. "Is she serious?" she asked him. The sheriff nodded solemnly. "Possession of stolen goods, Mrs. Wilson. If the owner demands it back, you have to surrender it." Chantel let out a sob that sounded like a wounded animal. She looked at the 100 people watching her. She looked at the cameras flashing. She realized there was no way out. The golden child was cornered. The queen of the ball was about to be stripped bare. Slowly, with trembling hands, she reached behind her back. The sound of the zipper moving down was audible in the heavy silence. It was a sharp, tearing sound like a veil being ripped. She shrugged her shoulders, and the heavy silk bodice fell away. She shimmied her hips, and the dress pooled around her feet like a puddle of melted snow. She stood there shivering in the air-conditioned room. She was wearing nothing but a beige body shaper and a strapless bra. She looked small. She looked fragile. All the pomp and circumstance, all the arrogance and posturing lay on the floor in a pile of white fabric. The crowd didn't look away. Someone in the back snickered. Then someone else laughed. It started as a ripple and turned into a wave. They were laughing at her. The elite of Atlanta, the people she had tried so hard to impress, were laughing at the woman in the Spanx who had tried to play queen in a borrowed castle. I reached down and picked up the dress. I draped it over my arm. I didn't look at her body. I looked at her eyes. "Get out," I said. Chantel let out a scream of pure humiliation. She covered her face with her hands and turned around. She ran. She ran out the open door, past the sheriff, past the security guards, and out into the dark, rainy night. She ran in her underwear, her bare feet slapping against the wet pavement, leaving behind everything she had ever valued. The laughter of the crowd followed her out, fading only when the heavy door slammed shut behind her. I stood there holding the dress, feeling the weight of it. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like justice. Heavy, cold, necessary justice. I turned back to the room. The guests were silent now, the laughter dying down as they realized the severity of what they had just witnessed. They looked at me with fear. They knew I was not a woman to be crossed. Then I saw movement in the corner of my eye. My mother Patricia was pushing her way through the crowd. She looked disheveled. Her hair was coming undone, and her face was pale and blotchy. She wasn't looking at the door where her favorite daughter had just fled. She was looking at me. She rushed forward, stumbling in her heels. She didn't stop until she was right in front of me. And then she did something I never thought I would see in my lifetime. She fell to her knees. She collapsed onto the marble floor, clutching the hem of my red dress. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face, ruining her expensive foundation. "Dominique," she wailed, her voice echoing in the large hall. "Dom, baby, please." I looked down at her. This was the woman who had called my husband a leech. This was the woman who had stolen his funeral money to buy liquor. This was the woman who had told me not to come if I didn't bring a gift. "Get up, mother," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "You are making a scene." "I don't care about the scene," she sobbed, clinging tighter to my dress. "I care about us. We are family, Dom. You can't do this. You can't throw us out. We have nowhere to go." I pulled my dress from her grip, taking a step back. "You should have thought about that when you drained the bank account," I said. "Dom, we didn't know," she pleaded, clasping her hands together in prayer. "Hunter tricked us. Chantel tricked us. They told us Julian was nothing. They told us the money was theirs. We were victims too, baby. You know how your father is. We just wanted to support the family." I laughed. It was a harsh, dry sound. "Support the family," I repeated. "You supported the family that gave you a show. You spit on the family that gave you sustenance. Julian paid your medical bills, Mom. Julian paid off your mortgage. And you sat at this very table yesterday eating lobster and laughing at his death." "I didn't mean it," she cried, reaching for my hand. I was drunk. I was stressed. Please, Dom, your father is old. He can't live on the street. We sold our house to move here because Chantel said this was forever. We have nothing left. Please don't punish us for their mistakes. I looked at her kneeling there, begging. I searched my heart for pity. I searched for that little girl who just wanted her mother to love her. But that little girl was gone. She had died in the funeral home when the credit card was declined. I am not punishing you for their mistakes, I said, leaning down so our faces were level. I am punishing you for yours. You chose a side, Mom. You bet on the golden child. You bet on the lie because it looked prettier. I stood up straight, towering over her. The lease covers all occupants, I said. That includes guests who have overstayed their welcome. You have 10 minutes to pack your bags. If you are not out by then, the sheriff will escort you out, just like he did your precious Chantel. But where will we go? She screamed, hitting the floor with her fist. It is raining. We have no money. I looked at the guests who were watching the matriarch of the family crumble. I hear the Motel 6 on the highway has vacancies, I said casually. It is affordable. Maybe if you return the wine you stole, you can afford a night or two. I turned to the sheriff. Sheriff Patterson, please ensure the property is fully vacated. I am going to inspect the master bedroom. I turned my back on my mother, who was still wailing on the floor. I didn't look back. I walked toward the grand staircase, the train of my red dress trailing behind me like a royal cape. I ascended the stairs, leaving the noise and the pleading and the wreckage of my former life below me. I was done being the daughter. I was the landlord, and the eviction was final. The view from the 45th floor of the Sovereign Building was different than the view from the graveyard. Up here, the world looked organized. The cars were just specks of light moving in predictable patterns. The chaos of the streets, the noise of the traffic, and the messy, desperate grasping of people like my family could not reach me here. It had been exactly 30 days since the night of the housewarming party. 30 days of silence. 30 days of peace. I sat in the high-backed leather chair that had once belonged to Julian. When I first sat in it a month ago, it felt too big. I felt like a child playing dress-up in her father's office. But today, the leather molded to my back perfectly. I swiveled gently, looking out at the Atlanta skyline bathed in the warm golden light of a Tuesday afternoon. The storm had passed both outside and inside my life. On the mahogany desk in front of me sat a stack of documents. Being the CEO of JD Holdings was not a ceremonial title. It was work. Hard, complex work. But it was work that made sense. Numbers did not lie. Contracts did not gaslight you. Assets did not tell you they loved you and then steal your debit card. I understood this world. I thrived in it. I picked up my fountain pen. It was heavy, cool to the touch. I signed my name at the bottom of an acquisition order. Dominique Brooks. The signature was sharp, confident. It was the signature of a woman who owned her name and everything attached to it. The intercom on my desk buzzed. It was a soft, unobtrusive sound, unlike the jarring ringtone of my old life. I pressed the button. Yes, Ms. Gable. My executive assistant's voice came through clear and professional, but there was a hint of hesitation in her tone. Ms. Brooks, I apologize for the interruption. I know you asked not to be disturbed during the portfolio review, but there is a woman on line 1. She has called 5 times in the last hour. I didn't need to ask who it was. I could feel it. The old phantom ache in my chest flared up for a microsecond before dying out under the weight of my new reality. Did she give a name? I asked, my voice steady. Yes, ma'am. She says her name is Patricia. She says she is your mother. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. Patricia. Not Mom. Just Patricia. The woman who had birthed me and then spent 34 years treating me like an insurance policy against her own bad decisions. Tell her I am in a meeting, Miss Gable. I did tell her, ma'am, but she insists it is an emergency. She says... Miss Gable paused, uncomfortable. She says she is calling from the Midtown Emergency Shelter. She says they have a time limit on the phone usage, and she begs you to just hear her out for 1 minute. The Midtown Shelter. I knew that place. Julian used to donate blankets there every winter. It was a grim concrete building on the edge of the city. It was loud, crowded, and smelled of industrial cleaner and despair. It was a far cry from the marble floors and crystal chandeliers of the mansion in Buckhead. I closed my eyes. I could picture her. I could see my mother standing in a line of people holding a plastic receiver to her ear, her hair unwashed, her expensive clothes stained and wrinkled. I could imagine my father sitting on a cot in the background, stripped of his pride, staring at a wall. I could imagine Chantel and Hunter somewhere in the system dealing with court dates and public defenders, their marriage likely dissolved into a puddle of blame and resentment. They were exactly where they belonged. They were living the reality they could afford. But still the tug was there. The societal programming that tells women they must be the fixers, the healers, the soft landing places for the people who hurt them. "She is your mother," a voice whispered. "She is homeless." I opened my eyes. I looked at the photo frame on my desk. It wasn't a picture of my wedding. It wasn't a picture of a family gathering. It was a picture of Julian standing in front of his first warehouse, smiling that quiet, humble smile. I remembered the rain. I remembered the empty chairs at the funeral. I remembered the text message calling his burial a minor event. The guilt evaporated. It was replaced by a profound sense of indifference. "Ms. Gable," I said, pressing the button again. "Yes, Miss Brooks. Please take a message for her." I picked up the file sitting on the top of the stack. It was the closing document for the sale of 1402 Oakwood Drive. The mansion. "Tell her I cannot take her call," I said, speaking clearly. "Tell her I am very busy. Tell her I am preparing for a major event." There was a silence on the line. "A major event, ma'am?" Ms. Gable asked. "Is there something I should add to the calendar?" "No," I said, a small smile touching my lips. "Just tell her the event is the rest of my life, and there is no guest list." I waited a beat. And Ms. Gable blocked the number. "Understood, Ms. Brooks. Have a good evening." The line clicked dead. The connection was severed. This time it wasn't a gate closing, it was a dial tone, and it sounded like a symphony. I looked at the document in front of me, the mansion in Buckhead, the stage for their cruelty, the house that Julian bought to buy me peace. I had listed it the Monday after the eviction. I didn't want it. I didn't want the memories. I didn't want the bad vibes. It sold in 3 days for $4.2 million. I looked at the check attached to the file. $4,200,000. I could have bought a yacht. I could have bought a vineyard in Italy. I could have bought anything I wanted. But I knew exactly where this money was going. I picked up my pen again. I pulled over the transfer form for the Julian Brooks Memorial Foundation. I filled in the amount. All proceeds. I wrote in the memo line, "for the education of underprivileged youth." So they never have to depend on anyone who treats them like a burden. I signed the check. With one stroke of a pen, the symbol of my family's vanity was transformed into a legacy of my husband's love. The house that tore us apart would now build futures for kids who actually deserved a chance. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of violet and orange. It reminded me of the colors of the bruises on my heart, finally healing. I wasn't the girl who waited by the phone for scraps of affection anymore. I wasn't the sister who faded into the background. I wasn't the wife who apologized for taking up space. I was Dominique. I was the CEO. I was the widow who bit back. I reached for the glass of water on my desk. I raised it to the horizon, to the memory of the man who saved me by leaving me the sword. "To us, Julian," I whispered. I took a sip. It tasted clean. It tasted like rain washing away the dirt. I turned away from the window. I turned off the office lights, leaving the city to twinkle in the darkness behind me. I walked out of the door, and I didn't look back. This story teaches us that silence is not submission, and kindness is not a weakness to be exploited. Dominique's journey reminds us that we teach people how to treat us, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to revoke access to those who use you. Family is defined by behavior, not biology. When people show you that they value your wallet more than your soul believed them the first time, your worth is inherent. It is not a bill to be paid by your sacrifice. True freedom comes when you stop buying the affection of people who cannot afford to love you back. If this story resonated with you, hit the like button and subscribe for more tales of justice and resilience. Have you ever had to cut off a toxic family member to save your own peace? Let me know your story in the comments below, because you are not alone, and your new life is waiting for you to claim it. Thank you for watching.